horror and revolting nausea rose up within me, and an odour of corruption choked my breath. I remained firm. I was then privileged, or accursed, I dare not say which, to see that which was on the bed, lying there black like ink, transformed before my eyes. The skin and the flesh and the muscles and the bones and the firm structure of the human body that I had thought to be unchangeable began to melt and dissolve.
You have undertaken to write what Stephen King will call one of the most terrifying horror stories ever set down on paper. Your characters wait until the evening, until the onset of night, to perform an experiment, a grotesque invasion of a young woman's brain with a surgical pick. What happens? She receives a vision which transforms her into a transmitter of a kind of obscene ecstasy.
I saw the form waver from sex to sex, dividing itself from itself, and then again reunited. Then I saw the body descend to the beasts whence it ascended.
You develop your themes. Other young women will suffer abduction and fairy copulation. The mountains will glitter with hell fire. The streets of London will scuttle with troglodytes. You will take your readers to places they cannot quite believe in, but which they cannot quite dismiss.
For one instance, I saw a form, too foul to be spoken of, as a horrible and unspeakable shape, neither man nor beast, was changed into human form. There came, finally, death.
Arthur Machen's themes are visions of madness, sex and death. Every scribbler of horror and thrilling tales has attempted them, but Machen draws them from beyond a veil between our own world and an underworld populated by gods, demons, and malevolent fairies. His visions might well make your heart beat faster even now, should you find yourself in the landscape which gave Machen his first glimpses behind that veil, in the riddle of wooded hills and valleys running down to the sea between the rivers Usk and Wye, in the southeast corner of Wales. What intrigues me, Mr. Machen, is the nature of your encounters in those secretive hills of your Welsh childhood. What happened to you? What so struck you that you should have spent your writing life returning here in your stories, peeling off the turf and fossil layers of history and folklore? What dark and turbulent underworld did you glimpse? Let's begin at the lonely house between the dark forest and the Silver River. Well, that was what you called it, Arthur. May I call you Arthur?
The two men were slowly pacing the terrace in front of Dr. Raymond's house. The sun still hung above the western mountain line, but it shone with a dull red glow that cast no shadows, and all the air was quiet.
This is Betholi House, high up on the eastern side of the valley of the River Usk and looking west, with the dark forest of Wentwood spilling down the hill behind. A grand mock Georgian edifice built from honeyed stone, this house appears again and again in Arthur Machen's stories.
The stone, it's that beautiful bath stone which almost radiates the sun back to you. It's a sort of mellow yellow.
The two men now pacing the terrace of the house more than a century after Arthur wrote the opening lines of his novella, The Great God Pan, are yours truly and Richard Frame, a writer, archaeologist and Machen devotee. Richard lives just a mile or two from here, on the southern edges of Wentwood.
This played a very, very important part in Machen's life. He lived over there towards the west at the rectory at Llandewi Fach.
You can't quite see Betholi House from Llandewi Fach, but when young Arthur did see it, on a ride out one day, it had a profound effect on him.
As they came over the brow of the hill, all of a sudden, he saw the building. The light must have been shining on it.
I saw the lonely house between the dark forest and the Silver River.
And for some reason or other, it was kind of shock and awe. It both fascinated him and frightened him, and he was entranced by it.
And years after, I wrote The Great God Pan, an endeavour to pass on the vague, indefinable sense of awe and mystery and terror that I had received.
It's a landscape which, when you walk through, you feel is sort of poised.
Jonathan Preece knows this landscape intimately too. He's a founder member of the Friends of Arthur Machen.
On a grey winter's afternoon, you'll find the landscape almost haunted and silent and grey. You feel as if you're on the edge of another world when you're walking through it, and this is what Machen captures in his writing.
When my eyes were first opened in earliest childhood, they had before them the vision of an enchanted land. As soon as I saw anything, I saw Tum Balum, that mystic tumulus, the memorial of peoples that dwelt in that region before the Celts left the land of summer.
And I think this encapsulates it. There's a landscape which is ancient, and it was peopled before the Romans, and those ghosts are still there.
There's a little bridge just down there, a medieval bridge coming down from Trudunnock. And when he looked across here, he would see this as just below the dark, brooding Wentwood Forest. This was the place, the dark place, where all the bad stuff happened. And it was almost kind of prehistoric, a bit like the Bronze Age, the Mesolithic, where they would bury people on tops of hills, and you had the place of the living, the place of the dead. And it kind of that comes right through history, right up to Machen's time.
Caerleon is the Welsh memory of what this place once was. Caer in Welsh is the equivalent of Chester in English. It means fortress, and Caerleon means the fortress of the Legion. This was the base of the Second Augustan Legion for 200 years.
Machen's grandfather, Daniel Jones, was vicar of Caerleon. His gravediggers frequently unearthed Roman artefacts, including an altar to the goddess Salus, and these became the basis of Caerleon's National Roman Legion Museum. Dr. Mark Lewis is the museum's curator and a master of the art of reading this landscape, especially those dark wooded hills.
The Silures tribe were famous for being stubborn and warlike and a very, very fierce foe. But interestingly, and Arthur Machen would have picked up on this, Tacitus says that when the victory finally fell to the Romans, it wasn't so much a victory over a brave and warlike foe, it was as much a victory over the landscape itself. That's because of the mountainous, heavily wooded region that inspired most of Machen's work, actually. It lends itself to guerrilla warfare. It's a very, very difficult kind of warfare to overcome, and the Roman legions really struggled with that during the campaign period.
The textures of the earth, the clay, the mushy dead worms, the rain, all that is very real.
This is Catherine Fisher. She's a poet and novelist who wrote the foreword to a recently published edition of Machen's novel, The Hill of Dreams. She's also worked on archaeological digs around Caerleon.
So you have this idea of history emerging out of the earth. You also have this idea of a great undiscovered mass of stuff, especially in Caerleon, which is only just under the surface. Tantalisingly close, but not available. And at the time there were these theories about, prehistoric peoples being remnants of, the remnants of them still lingering in the landscape, and the Welsh people being sort of somehow
small
remnant,
and dark,
small and dark, and left over from the dark, from prehistoric times. And that was very current, and certainly in his writing, when his protagonists meet the little people, as you want to call them, they do have this prehistoric, Neolithic type feeling about them.
Wentwood, a mass of ancient and intertwining groves, a ghost of the old wildwood which once stretched all the way to Tintern and the Forest of Dean. It's that lovely moment on an early summer evening when the world, especially the world of the woods, is left to the birds and the animals and the fading light.
So, how do you find a fairy? Well, Alice Thomas Ellis, the Welsh novelist, reported that a friend of hers had seen a fairy. And she said, really, how? And he said, well, it's very easy. You go to the edge of a wood at dusk, and you look at the wood, and you unfocus your eyes, you let them go sort of blurred, and you'll see one. But he said you want to be a bit careful, because they're very ugly and rather frightening.
There is something about Wentwood which is unknowable. I mean, there is a quote in Machen where he says, "And so I crossed Wentwood and found not that I knew it, but that it was hardly to be known." And there's this sort of unknowableness about the forest and the depths of the forest that you can never quite know it.
I just heard a twig behind us. Okay, so I'm going to look at the larches, because they look quite unpleasant. I find conifer forests very spooky places, I have to say. They're not benevolent trees, and walking through them's hell.
As a child, I came into a strange country, and strange it ever remained to me, so that when I left it, forever, there were still hills within sight, and yet untrodden lanes and paths, of which I knew the beginning, but not the end.
Some people feel claustrophobic in woods because you can't see what's coming. I was always brought up on a mountain and have lived among them where you can always see who's coming from where. But woods are different. Particularly conifers. I had a terribly frightening experience in the conifer wood along the mountain when I was a small boy. I had gone to the next wood along, and it was a really big one, big forestry thing, and I was freaked really, stumbling through it, and I came across suddenly there's something there. It's on the stump. You see it? It was a charnel house of skeletons. It was like a mass grave for sheep. And it was awful because I didn't know it was there, and it didn't smell. I was just 1 minute I was walking on, the next minute bodies everywhere. Yes, the little people are definitely out and about, but they're all feathered.
I see you, Arthur, strolling amongst these evening trees, inhaling the peace of the dusk.
We just met two people who've been walking their dogs and looking for birds here for the last 30 years, and they say there are nightjars here. So that would be a treat, because I've never heard one.
You'd have heard the nightjars, I'm sure, and sometimes as you strolled you must have contemplated your most uncertain future. As rector of Llandawi Fach, your father depended on income from a few acres of glebe lands, and in the agricultural crash of the 1880s he began to struggle for money. Your hopes of university and of following your father and grandfather into the church foundered. The family was forced to cast around for another career for young Arthur.
And because he'd written a poem and had it printed in Hereford by a local printer, the poem is called Eleusinia, they thought he would be a journalist. So this is the sort of idea that they had, and he packed him off to London, where he worked for various publishers. Then he came back to Gwent, mooned around, then he went back to London. He describes the process, interestingly, as the same as a samurai sword is made. It's plunged into hot fires and then into cooling waters and back into hot fires and back into cooling waters until it's hardened and tempered. And I think he found that experience difficult, but in the end rewarding.
A grey-green, greasy day, to bum half a line from Machen's rather more famous contemporary, Kipling, and I've ducked off Stoke Newington High Street in London and found an extraordinary place. It's thick with cow parsley and ash trees in full leaf, and hundreds of gravestones push up from the nettles, sheltered by the trees. It was Ian Sinclair, writer, scholar, polymath and father of psychogeography, who suggested we meet here at Abney Park Cemetery.
It's to take you into one of the projections of his prose, and Abney Park has so much of that, and it relates specifically to the story N, in which associates of Machen, as it were, set out to lose themselves and to see whether the myth of the paradise garden that can be discovered by techniques of wandering on the edges of the known in London really stand up and have validity.
Before me, in place of the familiar structures, there was disclosed a panorama of unearthly, of astounding beauty. In deep dells, bowered by overhanging trees, there bloomed flowers such as only dreams can show.
And he wants to prove that you can get lost, that you can go into these territories through the twilight streets of Hackney and find yourself in another world where there is only available for a moment a magical glimpse into a green world, in the same way that in Wales, obviously, the Hills of Dreams and the pagan underworlds are available in a flash of light at twilight, walking down a particular lane, turning through a hedgerow into a green tunnel, all those things. And the idea that you can do it in the heart of London is a little strange.
I saw well-shaded walks that went down to green hollows, bordered with thyme, and here and there, the grassy eminence above and the bubbling well below were crowned with architecture of fantastic and unaccustomed beauty, which seemed to speak of fairyland itself.
So that's almost what we're in now, the architecture of unaccustomed beauty, the strange angel shapes that are coming out of the cow parsley, the overhanging arches of green that remind me of the engraver Edward Calvert, who's a friend of Samuel Palmer, who's a friend of William Blake, and who's buried just behind us in the undergrowth. That's London, real knowledge, overreaching, imagination, fantasy, all cooking and simmering together.
Ian and I stop from time to time, and I stare into the trees and the undergrowth, unfocus my eyes, squint and hope for flashes of little people, for glimpses of fairies among the tombs. But perhaps I'm looking in the wrong place. If you leave Abbey Park Cemetery and head north, you find yourself in Tottenham Hale, not far from a reservoir above a canal. Like all spirits, the fairies do love water. In a quiet block of flats, there is a small room converted to an artist's studio. In the middle of it stands a young woman.
When I tell people I'm an artist and I make fairies, I don't think people take me seriously straight away. But then they don't know much about fairies.
J.M. Barrie's Tinkerbell could be a jealous and scheming fairy, but Tessa Farmer's fairies are her far more wicked sisters. They're tiny, certainly, but they're dark, skeletal, malevolent and conniving.
Tell me about what is it with you and these fairies? What have you been up to?
I can't stop making them and investigating their world, and I just feel I have this urge to find out more and more about them. Collecting materials I work with, so dead insects and bones and dead animals, and looking into overlooked places, which, and sort of getting these glimpses beyond the veil, which is very Machen-esque.
Machen-esque. You've become an adjective, Arthur. And it's not just Tessa's work that is Machen-esque. Tessa herself is literally Machen-esque in the sense that she's your great-granddaughter. Yet, uncannily, when she started making her twisted and twisting fairies, beginning an obsessive life's work which would take her art to major galleries the world over, she knew that her great-grandfather had been some sort of writer, but nothing more than that. It was only later that she discovered just how closely her work mirrors yours.
So I've got a mute swan stuffed hanging over me, and it's got ants going up its neck. The swan is in full flight, and it's an incredibly beautiful thing, but bits of its body are rupturing, it seems, and giving vent to insects and sort of possibly nests.
It takes a moment before I realise that the ants are being harnessed by something even smaller, yet much more powerful.
Oh my goodness, I didn't see it. Okay, so on the back of this very large ant is a tiny structure, and it's a skeletal figure with femurs, a spine, a ribcage, tiny, a head the size of a pin, and wings. And it's a skeletal fairy is standing on the back of this ant. So Tessa, is that made partly out of... Is that an insect's wings you've...
Yeah, they're honeybee wings.
Right.
And the fairies are made from plant roots.
Are they?
which is another link to the kind of the Machen-esque fairies coming out of the earth.
Yeah. Is that how you see the fairies? Are they that size, or can they change size?
No, they're this size always, but they develop their means of attack and predation, so they can attack much larger animals than themselves. They started off attacking insects.
How do they feel about us?
Well, we are the ultimate prize, and they want to take over the world and destroy humanity.
Is it frightening? You're talking about this hostile attack.
I get frightened by how they have, or feels a bit like I've been parasitised and they've taken over my brain and they're making me produce them. And at some point all will be left is like a dry husk of me.
At 8:45 that evening, the two men set out, taking the path through the wood and up the hillside. It was a dark and heavy night. The sky was thick with clouds and the valley full of mist, and all the way they seemed to walk in a world of shadow and gloom, hardly speaking and afraid to break the haunted silence.
So it's gone 9 o'clock in the evening, which is the time recorded by Arthur Machen in his short story, The Shining Pyramid, which is a terrifying tale dealing with the disappearance of a young woman ascribed to gypsies, but, according to our protagonist, much more sinister. And we're climbing the Grey Hill, which is the hill where the story is set. Suddenly becomes a very Machen evening. The clouds come in from the west, lower and greyer. We've just come through rough ground, found a path, and here we are. Stone circle with a standing stone. Oh, this is very strange. And this, I guess, must be the place.
I know the place, said Vaughan after a moment. I have often been by in the daytime. The country people are afraid to come here, I believe. It is supposed to be a fairy's castle or something of that kind. But why on earth have we come here?
They lay full length upon the turf. I think I should do this. They lay full length upon the turf, the rock between their faces and the bowl, and the rock is just here.
And the hours went by, and the darkness seemed to blacken, and the faint sigh of the wind was the only sound.
How much longer is this to last? He whispered to Dyson, and Dyson, who had been holding his breath in the agony of attention, put his mouth to Vaughan's ear and said, "Will you listen? Will you listen?" And that's Nigel. At exactly the moment we're supposed to hear something. That's one of the most extraordinary bird songs in the British Isles. A nightjar at the fairy castle. That was uncanny.
A low and gentle noise came very softly from the bowl, a faint sound, almost indescribable, but as if one held the tongue against the roof of the mouth and expelled the breath. He listened eagerly, and presently the noise grew louder, and became a strident and horrible hissing, as if the pit beneath boiled with a fervent heat.
And as the voice of a woman cried out loud in a shrill scream of utter anguish and terror, a great pyramid of flame spired up like the bursting of a pent fountain, and threw a blaze of light upon the whole mountain.
In that instant, Vaughan saw the myriads beneath, the things made in the form of men but stunted like children, hideously deformed.
their faces with the almond eyes burning with evil and unspeakable lusts, the ghastly yellow of the mass of naked flesh.
And then, as if by magic,
the place was empty, while the fire roared and crackled, and the flames shone abroad.
"You have seen the pyramid," said Dyson in his ear. "The pyramid of fire."
As I begin to pick my way back down the hill, back towards the woods, with the last of the light shrinking to dim, I think I understand what made you return to this place again and again in your stories. Antiquarians like your grandfather had revealed the archaeological layers of the once Roman earth. Below them there was the Iron Age, and then the Bronze, the era of the people who raised the stone circle, and below that is the Stone Age. But you, Mr. Arthur Machen, my master of the uncanny, you were looking for the layer below that.
And because it isn't there, except in folktale and in sensation, in the sensation of his childhood walks, he invents it. That's where his little people come from, that desire for a world beyond. And in this wild, old Gwent wood, you do just want the ground to open up and something to come out from underneath. And you don't want the disappearance of a child or a girl to be down to some ghastly maniac, but rather to something ancient, primeval, and slightly beyond our ken. I love that when the wind moves the high tops of the trees and the rest of them are still.
Arthur in the Underworld was presented by Horatio Clare. The reader was Brendan Charlson, and it was produced in Wales by Jeremy Grange.